CEO of Dainty Foods, James Maitland, telling the host of the podcast that the company is looking to expand operations into the U.S.
A lot of companies are moving into the U.S. so they don't have to pay tariffs.
What happens when one of your country's oldest food companies decides the future doesn't belong at home, but across the border? Is it just a business move or a warning sign that your nation's economy is slipping away piece by piece? Canada is facing a storm right now, and at the center of it is a single company with a very familiar name, Dainty Foods. For well over a century, this Windsor-based company has been part of Canadian households, quietly putting rice on millions of dinner tables. But now, it's making headlines, not because of tradition, but because of betrayal in the eyes of many Canadians. Dainty Foods has announced that it's expanding into the United States with a massive investment of $50 to $75 million over the next 4 years. That's not just pocket change, just a bold commitment, one that sends a very clear signal. The grass looks greener south of the border. And here's the question Canadians are now asking themselves: why the U.S.? Why take millions in potential Canadian jobs, revenue, and food security and pour it into American soil? The spark that lit the fire. The news didn't come with fireworks or a press release. It was casually dropped during an interview on the Food Professor podcast. Dainty Foods CEO James Maitland revealed that the company is finalizing plans for a new U.S. facilities, something insiders already suspected but hadn't heard directly confirmed. Almost immediately, panic spread. Was Dainty abandoning Canada? Would Windsor lose jobs? Was this the beginning of a larger exodus of Canadian companies? Maitland tried to calm the waters, insisting that there's nothing to be concerned about. He pointed to the company's $35 million investment in Canada over the past 3 years and a new Windsor distribution center that added 30 local jobs. He even promised that the U.S. expansion would somehow make Dainty Canada stronger. But critics weren't buying it. For them, this wasn't about a single company hedging its bets. It was about Canada's economic foundations starting to crack under pressure. The bigger picture: America first, Canada last. To understand why this matters, we need to zoom out. Dainty Foods isn't moving production to the U.S. in a vacuum. This decision sits at the crossroads of American economic strategy and Canadian economic failure. Former U.S. President Donald Trump's America First policies reshaped the playing field. His administration focused relentlessly on creating conditions that favor American businesses, lowered taxes, fewer regulations, and tough tariffs on imports. The result? Companies began looking at the U.S. as the land of opportunity again, even if they weren't American to begin with. Canada, meanwhile, under the leadership of Mark Carney, tried to play hardball with tariffs and boycotts against the U.S. The idea was to push back, to defend Canadian industries. But instead of protecting jobs, these policies made it harder for Canadian companies to compete, especially those like Dainty that rely heavily on the U.S. market. The numbers tell the story. At one point, Dainty Foods faced a 50% hit because of levies slapped on both sides of the border. With 40% of its sales going into the U.S., the company couldn't ignore where its bread or rice was buttered. So, when the U.S. beckoned with open arms and better business conditions, the choice seemed obvious. But obvious doesn't mean harmless. Why Canadians feel betrayed? For Windsor, Ontario, the hometown of Dainty Foods, this move feels personal. The company isn't just another business. It's part of the community's DNA, with over 140 years of history rooted in Canadian soil. Now imagine being told, "Don't worry, nothing's changing." Yet at the same time, you see tens of millions of dollars being poured into another country. It's hard not to feel like Canada is being left behind. And this isn't just about Dainty. It's about the ripple effect. When one major company packs its bags, others take notice. They start asking the same questions. If Dainty can survive better in the U.S., why can't we? Carney's problem, a strategy, backfiring. Mark Carney's economic approach was supposed to shield Canadians from the harsh edges of American trade policy. Instead, it has backfired spectacularly. Boycotts and tariffs might sound strong in theory, but in practice, they've raised prices for everyday Canadians, made businesses less competitive, and driven investment away. Instead of punishing the U.S., these policies ended up punishing Canadian consumers and workers. Dainty's decision is the clearest evidence yet. The company says the move is about growth and synergy, but critics argue it's about survival land. Survival meant escaping Canada's weak economic environment. A warning sign, not just a business move. Some Canadians might shrug and say, it's just one company. But that's like saying one leak in a ship doesn't matter. A leak is a warning. Ignore it, and soon the whole ship starts sinking. Dainty Foods is not alone. Other Canadian businesses have already shifted operations south, lured by the stability of the U.S. economy and the promise of better returns. Trump's America has become a magnet for investment, while Canada is left patching holes in its sinking strategy with flimsy promises. And here's the harsh truth: more companies will follow. The human side of the story. Behind the headlines and policies are real people, workers, families, communities. In Canada, people are already struggling with higher prices, wage stagnation, and uncertainty. Food banks are seeing record demand. Teachers are striking. Small businesses are barely hanging on, with surveys showing that 1 in 5 won't survive the next 6 months if nothing changes. So when a company like Dainty announces it's investing tens of millions into the U.S., it feels like salt in the wound. Canadians ask, why not here? Why not us? And the answer is simple. If painful, Canada isn't offering what businesses need to thrive. Looking south with envy. Compare the two environments side by side. In the U.S., businesses see lower taxes, fewer regulations, strong consumer demand, a government eager to keep investment at home. In Canada, they see higher taxes, confusing trade policies, retaliatory tariffs that cut into profits, leaders more focused on political games than economic results. For companies, it's not an emotional choice, it's math. And the math says the U.S. wins. The symbolism of Dainty's move. That's why Dainty's decision hit so hard. This isn't a flashy tech startup or a trendy new brand. It's a company that has survived wars, recessions, and political upheavals, rooted firmly in Canadian soil for generations. If even Dainty is looking south, what does that say about the future of Canadian industry? This is more than a business expansion. It's a symbol of a deeper crisis. Canada is losing its ability to keep its own companies at home. So the question that hangs over this story isn't just about rice or Windsor or even Dainty Foods. It's about the future of Canada's economy. If more companies follow Dainty's lead, will Canada be left hollowed out, its industries gone, its workers stranded, its future uncertain? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, how long before Canadians admit that the economic game has already shifted, and they're not the ones winning anymore? What happens when the very policies meant to protect your nation end up choking it instead? Could Canada's fight against American tariffs actually be the reason its businesses are running away? A nation at war with itself. Trade wars are supposed to protect your economy, right? That's the promise. When Mark Carney's government slapped tariffs on American goods, the message was clear: we'll hit back just as hard as you hit us. But reality has been much less heroic. Instead of punishing American companies, the tariffs punished Canadian consumers and businesses. Prices went up in grocery stores. Everyday families felt the pinch in their wallets. Small businesses found themselves paying higher costs on both imports and exports, leaving them caught in a squeeze with nowhere to turn. A recent survey revealed something alarming. 1 in 5 Canadian small businesses won't survive the next 6 months if the current trade climate doesn't change. Imagine that 20% of the nation's backbone gone in half a year. This isn't just about corporate giants like Dainty Foods. It's about corner shops, family-owned restaurants, and small manufacturers struggling under the weight of policies that were supposed to protect them. The domino effect of tariffs. Let's break this down. When the U.S. raised tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, Canada retaliated. But instead of leveling the playing field, the retaliation triggered a domino effect. Imports became more expensive. Businesses that rely on U.S. materials had to pay more, and those costs were passed directly to Canadian consumers. Exports became less attractive. Canadian goods became pricier in U.S. markets, making it harder for Canadian companies to compete. Investments slowed. Companies became hesitant to expand in Canada because the rules kept shifting and the risks grew higher every year. Dainty Foods admitted they took a 50% hit during the tariff standoff. For a company that sells nearly half of its products into the U.S., the message was loud and clear. Canada Canada is no longer the best place to do business. The American contrast. Meanwhile, the U.S. was playing an entirely different game. Trump's America First policies were simple. Keep jobs in the U.S., attract investment, and make it painful for companies to leave. And whether you love Trump or hate him, the results spoke volumes. American jobs grew. Companies that might have looked overseas started reinvesting at home. Tax breaks and deregulation made expansion easier and faster. So, while Canadian leaders were busy spinning promises and punishing consumers with tariffs, American leaders were laying out a welcome mat for global businesses. It's no surprise then that companies like Dainty Foods and even other Canadian firms started thinking, why struggle at home when the U.S. is rolling out red carpets for us? The illusion of strength. Mark Carney has insisted again and again that these policies are about strength. That's Canada must fight fire with fire against American trade aggression. Ontario's leadership echoed the same sentiment, saying tariffs were about protecting Canadian steelworkers and standing firm. But strength is measured in results, not rhetoric, and the results are painful. Canadian consumers face higher grocery and retail prices. Canadian businesses are losing competitiveness. Canadian industries, from food to manufacturing, are shrinking instead of growing. Companies with decades, even centuries of history in Canada are looking south for salvation. This isn't strength. It's a slow bleed, and Canadians are footing the bill. Everyday life in the middle of a trade war. For many Canadians, the trade war isn't an abstract policy debate's dinner table reality. Families that never used to step foot in food banks are now showing up in record numbers. Teachers are striking for fair wages. Taxi drivers and airline employees are demanding better conditions. These aren't isolated incidents, they're symptoms of a larger sickness. When the economy falters, it doesn't just affect big businesses. It ripples out into every household, every classroom, every paycheck. So, when politicians stand at podiums and declare our policies are protecting Canada, it rings hollow. Because on the ground, Canadians are struggling like never before. The U.S. magnet effect. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The U.S. doesn't even have to work that hard to attract Canadian companies. Its economic gravity is so strong that businesses are pulled in almost automatically. Think about it. A bigger consumer base, a pro-business government, tax breaks and incentives, political stability compared to Canada's tariff chaos. For a company like Dainty Foods, choosing the U.S. isn't about patriotism or betrayal, it's about survival. The logic is brutal but simple. In the U.S., they thrive. In Canada, they struggle. And if one company makes that calculation, others will too. A crisis of leadership. At the heart of this problem is leadership poor. The lack of it. Canada is one of the most resource-rich countries in the world. It has oil, minerals, fertile land, skilled workers, and geographic advantages. On paper, it should be a global powerhouse. So why isn't it? Because the leaders at the top are strangling that potential with red tape, high taxes, and policies that punish rather than protect. Instead of creating a business-friendly environment, they've created a maze of obstacles that drive companies away. Trump's America First approach may not be perfect to no policy is, but it's working. And that's why businesses are voting with their feet and their wallets. The wake-up call Canadians keep ignoring. Dainty Foods' move should have been a wake-up call. So should have been the closure of other Canadian plants, shifting to Illinois or other U.S. states. Each departure is a signal flare, warning that the Canadian economy is losing ground. But what has the response been? Denial? Excuses? Empty rhetoric about synergy and strength. Meanwhile, the money, the jobs, and the future are all flowing south. How many more wake-up calls will it take before Canadians demand change? The human question. This isn't just about numbers on a balance sheet or graphs in an economic report. It's about people, families, communities, entire generations. What happens when the next generation of Canadians looks for opportunity and finds it only in the U.S.? What happens when industries that once defined Canada vanish because it was simply easier to do business elsewhere? That's not just an economic problem. That's an identity crisis. So here's the haunting question. Is Canada already on a path it can't turn back from? If companies like Dainty Foods companies, rooted in Canada for over a century, are ready to pour millions into the U.S., what hope is there for smaller businesses struggling to stay afloat? Tariffs were supposed to defend Canada. Instead, they may have sealed its fate. And unless Canadian leadership changes course fast, The exodus of businesses may not just continue, it may accelerate, leaving Canadians to wonder if their country is slowly being hollowed out, one company at a time.